We are live.
Good morning. Welcome to the March 22nd, 2022 Durham Board of Adjustment meeting. The meeting will now come to order. My name is Jacob Rogers. I'm the chair of the board. I would like to start by acknowledging that we are conducting this meeting using a remote electronic platform as permitted by Session Law 2020-3. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body. There may be, okay, the Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by the North Carolina General Statutes and the city's Unified Development Ordinance. The board typically conducts evidentiary hearings on requests for variances, special use permits, among other requests. Today's meeting will proceed much like an in-person meeting of the BOA. On the screen, you'll see members of the Board of Adjustment. Additionally, planning staff and representatives from the city and county's attorney's offices are attending in the remote meeting. Applicants were required to register in advance and are also attending the remote meeting. When a case is called for its hearing, applicants and witnesses will be promoted within the remote platform so their video can be seen. The chair will swear in applicants and witnesses at the beginning of each case. Staff will present each case and applicants will then provide their evidence. Control of the presentation and screen sharing will remain with planning staff. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on the city's YouTube site, and the link to this broadcast is on the website for the Board of Adjustment. Before we begin the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda, I would like to provide some important information about steps taken to ensure that each party's due process rights are protected as we proceed in this remote platform. Each applicant on today's agenda was notified that this meeting will be conducted using a remote electronic platform. During registration, every applicant on today's agenda consented to the board conducting the evidentiary hearing using this platform. We will also confirm today at the start of each hearing that the participants in the hearing consent to the matter proceeding in this platform. If there is any objection to a matter proceeding in this remote platform, the case will be continued. Notice of today's meeting was provided by letters mailed to property owners and residents within 600 feet of subject properties, posting a sign at the property and posting on the city's website. The website and mailed notices for today's meeting contained information about how the public can access the remote meeting as it occurs. These notices also contain information about the registration requirement for the meeting, along with information about how to register. All individuals participating in today's evidentiary hearings were also required to submit a copy of any presentation, document, exhibit, or other material that they wish to submit at the hearing prior to today's meeting. All materials that the city received from the participants in today's cases, as well as a copy of the city staff's presentations and documents, were posted on the Board of Adjustment website as part of the agenda. No new documents will be submitted during today's meeting. No case is proceeding today in which the city has been contacted by an individual with an objection to the case or an objection to the matter being heard in the remote meeting platform. All decisions of this board are subject to appeal to the Durham Superior Court. Anyone in the audience other than the applicant who wishes to receive a copy of the formal order issued by this board on a particular case must submit a written request for a copy of the order. I'd like to now ask if there is anyone from the board who wishes to share or indicate if they've had any ex parte communication or any conflicts of interest with any of the cases on today's agenda. All right, well, good. Terry, would you mind calling roll for us?
Okay, Kip.
Here.
Meadows.
Here.
Paletta.
Dave.
Oh, I gotcha. Rogers.
Here.
Bretchless.
Here.
Major. Tarrant.
Here.
And Bushane.
Here.
Okay.
All right. Our next item on the agenda, any adjustments to the agenda? Cole, do you have anything to mention?
I do not.
All right. Well, good deal. All right, next is approval of our February 22nd meeting minutes. I hope everybody's already had a chance to look over those. Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Good morning, sir. There's a very small error in the minutes that I wanted to note with respect to case B21000055, indicating me as making the motion for approval on that case. Mr. Retchless made that motion. It's correct in the lower part of the minutes, but it's incorrect at the top.
All right. Good eye on that.
Otherwise, I don't have any problems with the minutes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve with, said correction?
I move.
All right. Retchless, I heard you
Second.
first. And then David will put you on the second. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Major.
I'm not sure I can vote on the minutes since I wasn't here.
Okay, Tarrant,
Yes.
Bashane,
Yes.
motion passes 7-0.
All right. All right. Terry, would you like to call the first case?
Okay, the first case is a city case. It's a request for modifications to conditions previously attached to the approval for a variance from the outer 50-foot of the 100-foot riparian buffer. The subject site is located at 2702, 2712, and 2717 North Duke Street, and also 1856 Birmingham Avenue. It's zoned PDR 8.0 and it's F/JB and it's in the urban tier. This case has been advertised for the required period of time, and the notifications affidavits verifying the sign postings and letters mailings are on file. Seated for this case is Kip, Meadows, Paletta, Rogers, Retchless, Major, and Tarrant.
Got it. All right. Would all the folks who plan on giving testimony for this case, please turn your video on. We'll administer the oath real quick. All right, let's see. All right. All right, if you'll raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Jess? I think I got to hear you, so yes, sorry.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Dan?
Yes.
Biker?
Yes.
Thank you. And do you consent to this remote meeting platform, Patrick?
Yes. Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I heard Jess. Thank you. Cole, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Good morning. I'm Cole Nigger, representing the Planning Department. Planning staff requests the staff report and all materials submitted. The public hearing to be made part of the public record with any necessary corrections as noted.
So noted. Thank you.
B 21-00042 is a request from a variance from the outer 50 of the 100-foot riparian buffer. The case area is highlighted in red. The site is in the urban tier, zoned planned development residential PDR, and is within the city of Durham's jurisdiction. The current use is vacant commercial. And Jess Brennan, the applicant, requests a variance to encroach into the 50-foot outer of the 100-foot buffer on this site. The 950 square feet of project area that will encroach into the outer 50-foot and 10-foot no-build setback will include a parking lot and a dumpster space for a proposed apartment building. The subject site is zoned plan development residential PDR 8 in the Falls of Neuse, Jordan Lake Protected Area Watershed Protection Overlay, and in the urban tier per Unified Development Ordinance UDO section 8.5.4C.1 for intermittent and perennial streams. Measurement of the riparian buffer begins at the top of bank and extends landward, and the required distance on all sides of the surface water measured horizontally on a line perpendicular to a vertical line making the top of bank. For the subject property located in the urban tier and in the FJB watershed protection overlay, there's a 100-foot buffer and a 10-foot no-build setback. The 150-foot is state mandated riparian buffer, but the other 50 is an additional city mandated requirement. The applicant only plans to encroach the outer 50 and the 10-foot no-build setback. I will say staff will be available for questions. You guys have heard this case previously and was proved, and it's just that the conditions couldn't be met. So we are just coming back to change those conditions unless you guys see new evidence that would make you want to deny the case.
All right. Any questions for COLA C1? Mr. Meadows.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Cole. Thanks for that. Yeah, I remember this case back on September 28th, and I was the one who made the motion for approval and the imposition of the condition under UDO 8511D. And so I guess my question is, it sounds to me like that condition wasn't workable within that context, or something has happened since then that makes that that condition unworkable. And I was hoping, whether you do it now or at some point during the hearing, if you could just walk me through the mitigation procedure in 8511 so that you know, we don't make this mistake again, or have, you know, we try to avoid this situation where somebody has to come back and modify a mitigation condition.
Yeah.
It's a little unclear about whether or not the variance has to go into the detail associated with 8511 or not. So I'll leave it to you and the chair's discretion about when we talk about that, but I want to understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, that's fine. And it didn't end up workable. We've asked the applicant to come back with alternatives to suggest, because in 8.511 there is mitigation, but there's also several different options.
Mhm.
And I think there was some issues, like you said, in this case, that wasn't known until they moved further in the process. But we have asked the applicant to bring some alternatives to that. But we can talk about that another time, about the mitigation process. If you have
Okay,
any answer your questions.
One last follow-up. Is it appropriate, and again, if you answer this, or counsel, whomever, is it appropriate for the variance to explore the possible mitigation options, or is it appropriate for that stuff to take place outside of the context of the variance? That would be the question.
So for the mitigation pertaining to the case, it should be in here, but as far as mitigation, other options, that probably should be held at another time.
Okay, I'm not sure I understood that, but let's move on. And if I'm still cloudy, I'll ask again. Thank you.
Okay, sorry if I was unclear.
This
Alrighty,
is Jessica Dockery from the Planning Department. I just wanted to clarify that they are not required to provide mitigation per UDO section 8.5. This would be a condition that is recommended by the board if you choose to do so. We are only offering the mitigation options in 8.5 as potential options, so that something similar to those would be appropriate, but you are not held to those either, because it's not a required mitigation.
Thank you. One more follow-up and then I'll be quiet. I really appreciate it. Let's say in this instance, or at least in the prior instance, the board felt it was appropriate to apply a condition for mitigation to this variance request. Was it appropriate at that time? Would it be appropriate at this time, were we to apply an alternative mitigation strategy? Would it be appropriate for us to talk about what that strategy is as part of the variance approval, or does that stuff happen after the variance approval?
Okay, that makes more sense. So it would be possible, it would be like the first thing you said. But what I'm saying is, we've asked alternate to bring some alternatives to that condition. So they may present those conditions and you may agree to one of those conditions, or you may have a different condition. So we can, at that time, we can hear. I know Krista has her hand up.
Thank you.
Krista Kukro, City Attorney's Office. I'll just elaborate on kind of the direction that Cole was headed. I think if the board determines that a condition related to mitigation is in fact appropriate, it is also appropriate for the board to discuss what that mitigation would be. I think there's several reasons for that. I think the applicant needs to know what's expected of them. There has to be consent to a condition. And so I think it needs to be sort of thoroughly discussed in order to let the applicant know what that would be.
Thanks, Krista. All right, any other questions for Cole? David. We've got you on mute, sir.
Sorry. It looks like attachment 2 at page 6 pertains to a later case, just a housekeeping detail.
All right, thank you.
That's all.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Cole before we move forward? Seeing none. All right, would the applicant like to come forward?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
We've got you.
Patrick Piker. Wonderful. Good evening. I'm sorry. Good morning, Chairman Rogers, members of the board. This is Patrick Piker with Morningstar Law Group. I'm joined today by Dan Jewell of Coulter Jewell Thames and Jess Brandis with CASA. Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, would like to go over our 5 exhibits just for the record. Exhibits A, B, and C are my resume, Dan Jewell's resume, and Jess Brandis's resume to qualify us as experts in the areas of planning, environmental mitigation, and affordable housing. And then our last 2 exhibits, exhibits D and E, that were turned into the planning department, are colorized versions of the site plan, one showing the overall site and exhibit E showing a blow up of the parking area. I know you have a lengthy agenda today, and so we don't want to take up too much of your time because the board did approve this variance unanimously back in September. I believe it was board member Tarrant who remarked on it's pretty remarkable when stream buffers eat up 80% of your parcel. And so that's really the hand we were dealt in trying to implement this project. CASA, just to give everyone the background so we're all on the same page, builds affordable housing for really our least fortunate residents. These are for 30% AMI residents of Durham. In many cases, their backgrounds are very difficult. And so we've moved forward with trying to build this affordable housing project at this location. And of course, we ran into the 110 foot total stream buffer. And so the board had a thorough discussion of this item back in September. I thought the staff report for today's item is well done. We simply need to not overanalyze the mitigation and instead has the condition be any form of mitigation authorized by UDO section 8.511. After a lengthy discussion, we agreed to a donation. Our reading of the ordinance was that we could donate some portion of the 80% of our site that's in the stream buffer to the city or the county in order to preserve it indefinitely as undeveloped acreage. Unfortunately, that does not meet the criteria in UDO section 8.5, which is quite lengthy, quite specific. As I had read through it, I thought, well, all that's really required is for CJT and Morningstar to collaborate on a legal description and a quitclaim deed to the city or the county. But of course, the devil is in the details. So rather than overanalyze this, I would respectfully ask that the board adopt the staff recommendation, and that would be sufficient mitigation in order for this desperately needed affordable housing project to move forward. Mr. Jewell and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And we thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the applicant? Mike Tarrant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just to clarify, are we approving just any of the options, or are we trying to hone in on what the options are? I'm looking at them now, and it seems that one is, construction of an alternative measure that reduces nutrient load, et cetera. And if I recall correctly, Mr. Jewell indicated in September that there was a stormwater control measure. So I'm just trying to get a better sense on what the proposal is here and what we're potentially approving.
It would be to allow the applicant for CASA to have flexibility as it moves through the site plan process, site plan construction drawings process. It's just difficult to ascertain what exactly the mitigation would be at this juncture. But of course, the UDO specifies what those measures could be. And so really to just allow this project to move forward expeditiously, we tried to come up with a dollar figure, and it's a moving target. And, it's just a case where as soon as we specify a number, we could go to a nutrient bank and find out that the price had gone up and we undershot it by $500. And then we got to come back to the Board of Adjustment because we didn't give you the right number. So if you're detecting a little bit of frustration in my voice, you would be correct. And so it's really just saying, look, there are options available under 8.511 in the UDO. We just need to have those options on the table. I think everybody moved forward in good faith back in September, but hindsight is always 20/20. And so I'm sorry that didn't work out. Again, I wish we weren't taking up your time this morning, but that's where we are. And I thought the staff recommendation in your staff report was spot on.
Right. Chad, do you have something?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chair, I do. I understand the applicant's frustration and appreciate their patience in trying to work through this. I understand. I think that the applicant is looking for the ability to select from among. So, if the variance were approved with a mitigation requirement, that the applicant be allowed to select mitigation options A 1 through 5. Based on the conditions on the ground at the time. I'm not exactly sure when that decision would be made. And so what I heard the attorney say was that it would be appropriate for the Board of Adjustment to discuss the mitigation as a condition in more detail. So I'm hearing the applicant say, well, we need flexibility, and I'm hearing the attorney say we need to nail it down. So did I just correctly surmise the conundrum that we're in?
I think that's if we were to nail them down to a specific one. Krista, you?
Yeah, thanks. Krista Kukra, City Attorney's Office. I think kind of hearing what the applicant is desiring and talking with staff, I think everyone is on the same page and is comfortable with sort of the kind of a general condition that talks about compliance with 8.5.11. So I think that if that's the flexibility that the applicant is articulating that they need, staff is comfortable with that, and I think that would also be appropriate. So to sort of clarify what I said earlier, Chad.
All right, so let me make sure I've got it right, and I think I do. Basically, there was a condition at the September meeting for this case that they were going to donate some land. That wasn't part of the, that couldn't happen per 8.5, and so now they're coming back for the flexibility of using one of the mitigations listed in section 8.5. Is that basically correct?
I think that's correct, sir.
All right. So, which makes sense. It's already in the code. It's kind of part of what we do. or your options. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Anybody here to speak against? I should hope first. Anybody else here who would like to speak in favor of this application? All right. Anyone here who wishes to speak against this application? Seeing none, let's bring it back to the table. Any discussion from board members?
I'd like to start, Mr. Chair, if that's acceptable. So, the reason I asked the question at the outset of the meeting was, yes, there is the code and what the code says, and there's options. It's not entirely clear about when those options are discussed or if those options are part of the decision. So that's why I asked the question. And, the first response was, yes, well, we should talk about it in detail. The second response was, well, we can just be flexible. I'm fine with being flexible. I'm not trying to interrupt this project or be problematic. I just want to understand what the rules are. And it sounds to me like it's okay if we have some flexibility. And that suits me fine. I certainly appreciate the application and don't want to put this applicant through any more trouble. At the same time, I just want to be sure that I understand what the rules are. And so I'm inclined to support this with a condition that a form of mitigation be applied and that the applicant be allowed to propose that mitigation and that staff be allowed to approve or deny that proposal. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Mike, Chair?
Yes. So, it's obviously a challenging site. And I think, as others have pointed out, we hashed through this quite a bit in September. I look at the exhibits and, we've got a couple of different buffers on the table here. One is the state maintained buffer, which is being satisfied in its entirety. Then we've got the city buffer, which is, an additional buffer because of the watershed protection overlay. And then we've got the 10-foot no build buffer, which adds, an additional challenge, especially with this site. So when I look at these exhibits, if I'm reading them correctly, if you take out the no build, the additional, buffer on the buffer, I'm really only looking at about 950 square feet on this entire site that is encroaching, and it's very little impervious surface, in my opinion, with what's being proposed and the goals that this project is trying to achieve. So with that being said, I'm in support of this application.
Thank you, Mike. David?
I agree with both the prior comments. It's a complicated site. Overall, the proposal, I don't see increasing any harm to the environment. It's a worthy proposal. I think the plan for today is practical, so I'm supportive.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mike?
I'm sorry, I just have a question pertaining to the proposed possible motion at the appropriate time.
All right, what is that? What you got?
So it says a form of mitigation is provided similar to the options in the UDO, but I would assume that based on my interpretation of the UDO, it has to be one of the options. So I just was looking for clarification on staff if a possible modification to the motion might be necessary or appropriate.
Jessica, you're muted.
This is Jessica Dockery from the Planning Department again. So to clarify, because this is not required mitigation, you do not have to request that they meet one of those specific mitigation options. You can use whichever option you choose to add as a condition, or you may leave it open for them to do something similar. It's entirely up to you. This is a condition that you all are putting on the plan.
Thank you.
Right. Finally, any other thoughts you'd like to share? All right, well, mine would be similar to what you've heard already. I think that this is a good way of putting it, David, was practical. To me, it's somewhat of a no-brainer, so I'll support as well. Would anybody like to offer a motion?
I will, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Meadows.
I hereby make a motion that case number B21-00042, an application for a request for a variance from the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot riparian buffer on property located at 2702, 2712, and 2717 North Duke Street and 1856 Birmingham Avenue has successfully met the applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance and is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. 1, the improvements shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application. 2, a form of mitigation is provided similar to the options available in UDO section 8.5.11a.
All right, we have a motion for approval by Mr. Meadows. Is there a second?
Second.
There you go.
Rickless on the second. Terry, you want to take it away?
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
Tarrant.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
By a vote of 7-0, your request for this variance has been approved. We appreciate you guys coming, or you all coming to the Board of Adjustment this meeting.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to the next case. Terry, would you like to call it?
Yes, this is a county case. It's a request for a variance from the street yard setback. The subject site is located at 3909 Bristolwood Drive. It's zoned RS20 and F/J-B watershed protection overlay, and it's in the suburban tier. This case has been advertised for the required period of time, and the notarized affidavits verifying the sign postings and letter mailings are on file. Seated for this case is Kip, Meadows, Paletta, Rogers, Richless, Major, and Tarrant.
All right. Chris, do you have something?
Yes, this is Chris Peterson, Planning Department. We have a few individuals said they did not want to speak on this item, but I didn't know if you wanted to raise the opportunity if they wanted to present testimony or not. There is a lot of opposition here.
Okay.
But the individuals that I've brought in did state that they did wish to speak today.
Okay.
If anyone else wants to come in, please use the raise hand button if you wish to present today.
Yeah, now would be a good time because anyone who speaks on today's cases has to be sworn in. So we want to make sure we get that done. If you do plan on giving testimony today, we will need your video on and to administer the oath. Linda and Derek Eubanks, I just want to make, what does this NS mean?
Not speaking. That's
okay. I thought so. I just
do a lot.
Got it. All right. If you are planning on giving testimony, if you'll please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Robert Brown?
I do.
Lisa Ellis?
I do.
Joan LaRosa?
I do.
And the other lady with you?
Vivian. Vivian, and I do.
Vivian. And Vivian, what's your last name?
Williams.
Williams. I just want to make that for the record. All right. And do you consent to this remote meeting platform? Vivian?
Sure, yes.
Joan?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
And Robert?
I do.
All right. Thank you. Cole, turn it over to you.
All right. Good morning again. I'm Cole Reiniger, representing the Planning Department. Planning staff requests the staff report and all materials submitted at the public hearing to be made part of the public record with any necessary corrections as noted.
So noted. Thank you.
B 22-00003 is a request from a variance from the street yard setbacks. The case area is highlighted in red. The site is in the suburban tier, zoned residential suburban, and is in the county of Durham's jurisdiction. The existing use is vacant. Lisa Ella requests a variance from the infill standards street yard setbacks for a proposed single family dwelling. The property is in the RS20 zone district, the FJB watershed protection overlay, and in the suburban tier. Unified Development Ordinance Section 7.1.2b requires that the street yard in the RS20 zone district shall be 35 feet. The parcel is a corner lot, and the applicant is requesting a variance from the street yard to allow a 16-foot street yard along Alistair Road for a proposed single-family dwelling. Staff will be available for questions throughout the hearing process.
Thanks, Cole. Any questions for Cole before we hear from the applicant? Seeing none, would the applicant like to come forward and present their, give us a little more information? Is that Lisa?
Yes. Hello, I'm Lisa Ellis. I bought this lot in the fall of last year to build a single family home on. And we applied for our permits to build and were told that there were side street setbacks on both the front and the right street. I've bought infill lots like this before and built on those, but never on a corner lot. So I wasn't aware of the ordinance for the corner lot setbacks along with the front. We've proposed, as you see here, we'd like to sit the house really in the same geographic, location that the rest of the houses in the neighborhood sit in, which is, about 35 feet off the front property line. And the same style of house, which is kind of a ranch style house that's built in the neighborhood. Now we were trying to keep it very much in keeping with the neighborhood, so it blended in. Once, we found out about the setbacks, which, kept our permit from being approved, we've started to go through this process to find out if a variance is an option, because if we are, to have to go to the rules of the setbacks, it's going to have to be a very different house. It won't be in keeping with the neighborhood. The setbacks, are such that if you have 35 feet from the front and 35 feet from the side, you've got about 40 feet left to build, wide for a house, which is going to make it more of a shotgun style row house versus a left to right symmetrical house that would be in keeping with other ranch style neighborhood houses in the neighborhood. So we're asking for a variance from the right sideline off of Alistair, so that, we can build the house with a front driveway like the other houses have in the neighborhood and keep it in the same style.
All right. Lisa, I want to ask you one question, just kind of part of our procedures here. Would you like all of your written and oral testimony to be part of the public record?
That's
Perfect.
fine.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Something we have. Chad, you've got a question for the applicant?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Thanks for coming. I have a couple of questions. Is it possible for you to access the lot from Alistair Road? Is there anything that you know of that limits you from accessing the Alistair Road instead of Bristlewood that you're aware of?
Just that the address is addressed 3909 Bristlewood Drive. So, we bought the lot with the address facing Bristlewood.
Okay. And one more question. Could you talk a little bit more about the design of the house? I see from the exhibit on the screen that it's approximately 67 feet. I think that's the width determination with the
garage. Yes.
Right. So could you talk a little bit more about why that's necessary?
It's just the style of the house that we proposed. It was more of a house that goes left to right versus front to back, because that seems to be what's in the neighborhood. All of the houses that are there now are mostly brick ranchers. There's a few new newer houses built that are 1.5 stories around the neighborhood. But for the most part, it's, it's a 80s brick ranch style neighborhood. And we just wanted it to blend in as a newer construction versus really stand out.
I see. And then one last question. Would it be possible to consider rotating the house 90 degrees so that you could perhaps reduce the amount of variance that's necessary from the Allister Road setback? Is that a possibility, or is that just not going to work?
It doesn't work with that plan. Just because it just isn't styled that way or set up that way. And if it were to face Allister, it would be the only house that I know of that faces a corner in that direction. They all typically face into the middle road.
Thank you.
All right, Mike Tarrant.
Yes, I was curious. You mentioned Ms. Ellis several times about this blending in and fitting into the character of the neighborhood. When I look at the size of the other houses, especially in the immediate vicinity of this particular lot, they all appear to be in sort of the 32 by 64 range, give or take a few feet. So this home it appears to be significantly larger than that. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how this really fits into the character of the neighborhood and meets the spirit and intent of the ordinance.
Sure. I mean, I think 62 and 67 are pretty close on width. So the sizes you just mentioned, I think we're kind of in line with that. To build these days, I mean, building a small house is really expensive, so to build a little bigger house isn't that much more expensive. I mean, the cost of materials are out the roof right now. And so we're trying to find a balance between, what's sellable in today's market with the cost of land, materials, and supplies, and the smaller houses, just eat up so much of that. So the goal is to build a house that is in keeping with the houses that are around it. I mean, if you drive through that neighborhood, they are not all brick ranchers. I mean, there are several that have been built on in the last 5 years, maybe 5 to 10 years that, do have garages, do have an upstairs. It's just that this neighborhood was built in the 80s and they're mostly 1-story, brick ranch homes, which you really just can't build those anymore.
Right. Mr. Meadows, another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my last question, would it be possible to have a detached garage that would allow you to shift the structure over some number of feet, maybe not 35, but closer or farther from the Allister Street Road right of way than 16? Would that be a possibility, or is that impossible?
That just adds to the cost. I mean, the house just gets more and more expensive because now you've got 2 detached structures. You're building 2 houses instead of 1, basically.
Okay.
So cost prohibitive, it doesn't work.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Is there anyone, Cole, would you mind? Thank you, sir. Anyone here further to speak in favor of this application? All right. Is there anyone here to speak against this application? Joan? All right. We're going to go with Joan first.
Please go with Rob first.
Okay. Robert? Mr. Brown?
Can I be heard?
Yes.
Good.
Rob, would you like me to pull up your exhibits?
Yes, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
My name's Robert Brown, retired architect. I live at 3916 Bristol Wood Drive, across the street adjacently to this lot. And in discussion with the neighbors, we feel that the 16 feet setback is excessive and not in character. I put a letter together that was sent to the Board of Adjustment through staff, identifying the criteria for that. I'd like to just briefly hit on a few key points of that letter, if I might. Being a request for denial of the above mentioned variance request that allows 16-foot setback on the street side or long lot dimension property line at Allister Road. The request is non-compliant of current zoning, the neighborhood character, and diminishes neighborhood harmony. It does not meet the criteria for ownership or owner hardship for the following reasons. Item 1 on the staff report, lack of hardship. Though this property has a 35-foot setback on all street frontages, this is a new requirement since 2012. This criteria was in place prior to purchase of the lot, as stated in the staff report, and will allow, and with minimum variation, a home layout that complies with the setback and fits the neighborhood can be created. The applicant's taken action by non-compliant design that creates a perceived hardship. A home of equal size as proposed is viable by a different orientation or a different layout. Therefore, the applicant did create the hardship by lack of design due diligence. Item 4 on the staff report, spirit, purpose, and intent of ordinance. In consideration of the intent, we find that this excessive setback reduction creates unequal justice to the current established properties and streetscape open space. A scaled study of the request envelope identifies over 26% reduction of the setback that has a real impact on view corridors once the setback request is approved. In conclusion, the variance request is filed violates equal justice to the neighborhood. The hardship is self-created by the applicant's lack of due diligence or lack of design options. The house design can be rotated or redesigned to comply with setbacks for zoning conformity. It seems unlikely that, as stated in the staff report, the original subdivision had no setbacks. However, the previous zoning RR20 had a defined 25-foot street side yard setback that complies with the existing homes. The corner lot across the street maintains that setback and has ample room for that home. As an aside, a home on Danbury also is turned to the long side face entry and has a narrow side garage entrance. But this is a long-established, friendly, inclusive neighborhood, and we look forward to a new home there. We therefore suggest that if the current design is held to the new ordinance side yard setback of 12 feet in lieu of 16 and modified to the street side setback, a 25-foot side street setback would allow the home development similar to the existing corner lot conditions and neighborhood character. Therefore, denial of the variance request as submitted without a minimum 25-foot side street setback on Allister Road is urged. That's pretty much the position of most of the neighbors all of the neighbors I talk to. Thank you.
Staff would like to mention at this time that he did express that there was multiple neighbors. There was multiple neighbors in protest, but I told him that in order for them to be counted and not hearsay, they would need to attend the meeting.
That is correct. Thank you, Cole.
Welcome.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Brown? All right. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Joan?
Yep.
Sorry, I believe David has a question. I saw him raise his hand in his video.
Sorry, David.
I was a little slow at I'm still learning where the buttons are. Mr. Brown, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit and just help me understand understand the objection aesthetically. What negative impact do you perceive it would present? I'd just like to understand your thinking a little better.
I understand. This subdivision is half-acre homes that have been established here for quite some time. And the new ordinance having 35-foot setback on both sides, as from my understanding, is to establish view corridors compatible with the homes along the street. The setback of 16 foot would push the house closer to the street and not in compliance with how the homes are established in the neighborhood. That is part of the problem that we're looking at. Is we want to have a similar view corridor and neighborhood compliance as the neighborhood is established now.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Brown? Seeing none. Vivian, we'll turn it over to you.
You want to speak?
Or Joan, I'm sorry, Joan or Vivian, I'm sorry.
Joan,
Joan's going to speak.
she's the speaker.
First of all, I want to thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this. This is a new experience for me. I don't know words like view corridor and some of the other things. So I've learned a lot through this experience. Rob has a big following in this neighborhood, and there are a dozen people who signed his letter and support his letter. And I went around and tried to get as many as possible to register on Zoom. People like Vivian didn't even have Zoom, so she came over to my house. But the neighbors across the street and up and down Allister are very much in support of Rob's objections. We walk our dogs every day, sometimes twice or three times a day around this neighborhood. All of the houses are set back. This house, the last thing I want to do is look in somebody's bedroom window when I'm walking by with the dog. This house is going to be out of blending in with the neighborhood. It doesn't blend in at all. The houses in this neighborhood were built in the 60s. They were built in the 70s. Some of them were built, the last ones were built in 2007. And they're all pretty small, modest houses, and they're all set back. You can't walk by any house and look in the windows. And this house will be, it just does not blend in. It's gonna stick out, and it's gonna be much closer to the road. And so in keeping with the design of the neighborhood, we really object to this design. We'd like a smaller house. We'd like it set back. A lot of the houses in the neighborhood have the garages in the back. And so if you're going to have a detached garage in the back, that would certainly solve the problem. And many of the houses do. So, you know, as the neighborhood really got together on this, and the neighborhood really objects. And several people signed up to not speak, but also to be opponents to this. And I appreciate the opportunity to participate. Thanks.
Thank you, Joan. Any questions for Joan before we move forward? All right. Lisa, as the applicant, you get to provide a rebuttal to the opposition if you have that opportunity now.
Sure. I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that, other than the fact that the setback would be 16 feet to my property line. And then there's, another probably 15 feet to the road itself. I mean, my property, doesn't go all the way to the road. There are setbacks around that as well, between me and Allister Street. So it's a larger distance than just the 16 feet. That's just from the property line. And I hear everyone's point, and I can appreciate all of that. The goal is to provide housing in Durham for people to have places to live. It's my hometown, and I like everything about Durham. So I'm not trying to do anything that, I wouldn't be allowed to do. I'm just trying to build a house that, is affordable to build in today's market. I don't think people understand, the cost of things and what supplies are. A detached garage, is like building literally a whole nother house. It has a foundation, a roof, finishes. I mean, it's probably, $80,000 to $100,000 these days just to build a garage. So it has to go in with the house. It can't be separate. But, I guess that's my biggest really point of of response is that, the 16 feet is off my property line, and that doesn't sit on Allister Road. There's a setback between the road and my property line as well. So people aren't going to look in and see what you're having for breakfast. It sits up above. It's an elevated lot as well from the street level. But we want to do something really nice for the neighborhood and bring a great new neighbor to Durham. And I'm looking forward to building a beautiful house there to enhance the neighborhood.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. This is a variance. Obviously, we do not get a recommendation from staff on this. Let's bring it to the table, have some discussion. Anyone want to start? Any board member? I don't mind starting. All right, I will. I'm very familiar with this area. I was a neighbor to this property for about 5 years up until recently, and very familiar with the neighborhood. It's, I guess you'd call it an established neighborhood. There are some newer homes. Lennar built a community a couple blocks away from this up, can't remember the road. I had it pulled up, McAllister, and used to walk this neighborhood every day too with my dogs. And I remember passing this lot and wondering why it was never, I guess, developed. But I know that we have dealt with these corner lots and these setbacks as a board before. And we've always made the distinction that they're different because obviously they're on the corner, and it's been harder to build on these corner lots because of the setbacks. And so that's something to mention. At the same time, we've got, unfortunately, Ms. Ellis, one of the things about the Board of Adjustment is cost prohibitive, or costs aren't, something that we are able to take into consideration. We look at the design and is there an alternative, and what makes this property so unique that either this design has to happen or there's no alternative. I think that's really what we look at. And what brings me to this is that it's a corner lot, so I can understand how and I don't know many two-story homes in that neighborhood until you get on McAllister and into the Lennar community. But with those setbacks, I mean, I would imagine it would have to have a two-story home. It would be a little out of compliant, when I say compliance, I mean, the neighborhood feel. So some of the thoughts I have just from my experience in the neighborhood and being there, and also my experience with the board and us looking at these type of lots. I'll shut up. And Mike, Terrence, do you have any thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just, I guess, not really convinced that there's a hardship here. Usually when we deal with sort of these infill lots, we're dealing with significantly smaller lots that are really challenged and perhaps in some cases environmental features and so forth. This is a pretty sizable lot. And, even though there are, it's a corner lot and there are street yard setbacks on two sides, the remaining building envelope is still pretty reasonable. I think a fairly nice home could still be constructed or built on this lot. When you look at the context of the area, the existing homes really sit back quite a ways from the street. And I feel in this particular case that the UDO setback requirements should be, should be maintained to the extent practicable. So with that, I'm kind of challenged in thinking that there's really a hardship here that I can support.
Thank you, Mr. Tarrant. Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate the fact that we're trying to build on an infill lot. I think that's important. At the same time, when I think about corner lots, there's a reason that those street setbacks are deeper for purposes of safety, for purposes of clear sight, for purposes of avoiding vehicles potentially having some sort of mishap with the structure. These and other reasons are why they have deeper setbacks along the streets, and that's important too. I looked at the criteria for approval of a variance, first being unnecessary hardship would result if the variance weren't granted. After looking at this site and looking at some of the other houses, I believe that a house could still be built on this lot and meet the 35-foot street setback along Allister Road. In fact, a house of comparable size, even a little bit larger than the average size, according to the staff report, could still be built and meet those setbacks. The second standard is that this is a condition that's peculiar to the property. No, I don't find that that's the case. In fact, I look at 937 Allister and 3800 Bristlewood, also corner lots, and both of those structures have street setbacks on both sides that meet the requirements. So we've got similar lots in close proximity that were able to meet these standards. Last thing that sort of stuck out to me was that this proposal, with the variance would be consistent with the spirit of the ordinance. And I haven't really seen any sort of concession or evidence that there has been an attempt to reduce the amount of variance or try to attempt to comply with the street setback standards in order to meet that intent. And so, for those reasons, I'm not comfortable approving this variance. Thank you.
David.
I'm struggling with this request. I find it easy to understand the applicant's point of view and then the neighbor's point of view. I think they're both reasonable. And I'd encourage the comments of two other board members are helpful to me to just wrestle through in my mind how to weigh the issues. With regard to the proposal being in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance, I am influenced a lot by some neighbors saying it's not, because I think they know the neighborhood the best. They live there, and that influences me a lot. Also, at least while I've been on the board, we've been pretty strict about is there a hardship? And here there are some other options. And the fact that they're less convenient is not a factor we really can take into consideration too much. There are some other options. So I'm leaning toward finding there's not a hardship.
All right, anyone else? All right, Lisa, there's a couple of things we can do. We have the option to continue this case. I think right now there probably aren't enough votes for this to approve. And so there's two options. I can call for a vote and we can see how it turns out, or we can continue it to our next meeting if you want to bring in more evidence of why this design is the best option and there's really no alternative, to kind of give us a little bit more information on that end. Really, those are the two options that we have before us.
Sure. Well, I mean, I just appreciate the opportunity to come in today and have this conversation. I haven't had to go through this before with the 10 other lots in Durham that I've bought in my experience and built on. So, I've learned something new, which my goal is to learn every day. I hear the neighbors, I can't really dispute that. I will either work to turn the house long way with Allister, which is going to really give them a terrible backyard. But, my options are somewhat limited with that. But there's no need to vote against it today. I'll just get within the variance and make the adjustments. If I have to change the floor plan, I will. If I can turn it, I will. so that we're within the current setbacks. I mean, I certainly, we want to have nice neighbors come to the neighborhood and live there and have, peace and harmony in the neighborhood. I'm not one that wants to have any issues out there. So I'll do my job, as a good local resident builder and realtor to go back and find a plan or turn it so that we don't have to have this conversation again.
And the variances are tricky because, it's a little bit different of really identifying and that hardship, and then, kind of convincing of why a certain design is the same way. This is a very difficult thing. And I know this is a process that you've been in for a while now. It's definitely not taken lightly. So, all right, I've got a question for Brian. Brian, given what you've heard today, how do I need a vote to do anything, or what do we do?
Yes, you actually have to have 2 votes.
Okay.
So you have to have a vote on whether or not to continue the matter. It can either be a request that's made by the board to continue it, or it can be a request that's made by the applicant to continue it.
Okay.
I'm not sure I've heard from the applicant as to whether or not they want to request a continuance.
No, thank you.
All right. Well,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
No, I don't want to extend the variance request. We can, however you guys need to take it off the table. I don't have the time, honestly, to keep going through the process. I need to just move on. So however y'all need to wrap up business.
It sounds like a withdrawal.
I can withdraw it.
Brian, what do you?
Well, the case has been open. And so once the case has been open, you either have to continue it or you have to make some decision on the application. The evidence has been presented, and so you have to move on it or continue it. And the applicant doesn't seem to want to have a continuance, so I think it's probably ripe for a motion and a vote.
All right. Well, there's 2 motions that can be made: one to continue, or one to approve what you have before you. I have a hard time with doing the approval because it's really up to the will of the board. Does anybody have a motion for either one? Mr. Meadows?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
And this is a little bit off script, and this is to everybody. Is it possible for us to make an alternative motion than what's listed in the staff report that simply says, make a motion that the case be denied? Is that a possibility, or is that off the table for us?
No, all the motions need to be in the affirmative. So you can actually make the motion in the affirmative, but then you don't have to actually vote for it.
That's right.
Right.
But what comes before the body has to be an affirmative motion for approval. And then if it doesn't reach the necessary number of votes, then it's denied.
Right. Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion.
Okay. Jessica, do you have something?
I had kind of an alternative suggestion. I know that Ms. Ellis said that she did not want to come back. Was it possible to continue the case to a later date, not with the intention for her to come back, but with her intention to then withdraw the application after this meeting is over?
That is actually my preferred method of doing this, just because I'm familiar with these processes, and I think that that's the best thing to do personally. But yes, that can happen. We've had it happen before.
So,
right?
If that has happened before, I don't recall that. But if we're going to continue the matter, and I'm not saying it hasn't, Jacob, you've been there almost as long as I have, so it may have, and I just don't remember. But typically, you have to continue these things to a date certain, and staff has to consider it in their planning, and so I'm not entirely comfortable with continuing it to allow someone to withdraw the application when we are tasked with the responsibility of voting on it.
I completely understand that too. So, all right, Mr. Meadows, do you have a motion?
I do, sir.
Go ahead.
I hereby make a motion that case number B22000003, an application for a variance from the street yard requirements on property located at 3909 Bristlewood Drive has successfully met the applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance and is hereby granted.
I'll
All right.
second.
We got Paletta on the second, and Terry, will you call the roll?
Terry, you are muted.
Sorry. Kip?
Yes.
Okay, Meadows,
No.
Paletta,
No.
Rogers,
No.
Retchless,
Yes.
Major,
No.
okay, Tarrant.
No.
Okay, motion fails.
2-5.
Yep.
All right. Lisa, we appreciate you coming for the BOA this morning and wish you all the best of luck.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Yes. Moving forward, do we want to break? Does anybody need a break? We're about an hour and 10 minutes in, or you want to go ahead and hear the next case? I'm hearing nothing. We'll go ahead and hear the next case. Move it forward. All right, let's do it. Terry, you want to call it?
Yes, the next case is B22000004. It's a city case. It's a request for a variance from a side yard setback. Subject site is located at 909 Hale Street, and it's zone residential Rural 5 and Old West Neighborhood Protection Overlay, and it's in the urban tier. This case has been advertised for the required period of time, and notarized affidavits verifying signed postings and letter mailings are on file. And seated for this case is Kip, Meadows, Paletta, Rogers, Retchless, Major, and Tarrant.
All right. Everyone who wishes to speak on this case, would you please turn your video on? I see. All right. We'll need to administer the oath. If you'll please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Mary Hill?
I do.
Cam Hill?
I do.
All right. And do you consent to this remote meeting platform, Cam?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
All right. I think that is all we've got. And Cole, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning again. I'm Cole Nigger, representing the Planning Department. Planning staff requests the staff report and all materials submitted to the public hearing to be made part of the public record with any necessary corrections as noted.
So noted, thank you.
Case B22000004 is a request of variance from the side yard setback. The case is highlighted in red in the RU5 zoning district within the city of.
I'm not sure if we've got the right thing in front of us.
Is it stuck on the same screen?
Yeah, 909 Hale Street Planning. It's got the logos on it. That's what I'm seeing. I guess everybody else is seeing the same.
Sorry. Give me 1 second. Is this better? Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. This is what I was saying. Requesting the variance in the side yard setback. B220004 is in the urban development tier, zoned residential urban RU5, and is in the city of Durham's jurisdiction. The existing use is a single family. Mary Hill, owner and applicant, requests a variance of 1 foot from the side yard to the north, resulting in a 5-yard side yard setback instead of the 6 required by the Unified Development Ordinance, UDO section 7.1.2b. This property is located in the residential urban RU5 zone district in the Old West Neighborhood Protection Overlay and in the development tier. The applicant wishes to build onto the existing house that already encroaches 0.2 feet into the setback. This new addition would add an additional 0.8 feet in the setback, resulting in 1 foot, triggering the need for a variance. A building permit was issued by the city in May of 2021, and construction began on the foundation and was inspected and approved. After a foundation survey was requested by the lender, it was revealed that the new addition was further into the 6-yard setback and violated the UDO. Staff will be available for questions during the hearing process.
All right, any questions for Cole? I see we've got Chad first.
Thank you. Good morning. Cole, one thing I don't understand, one of the things that was included in the packet of materials, and I'm hoping that you can explain this to me, is a copy of a certificate of compliance issued by Durham City County Inspections, which it was issued on March 7th of this year. And what is this? Has this been built and complete? It looked like the applicant filed this application for a variance in January of this year, but a CO for the property's been issued on March 7th. Help me understand what's going on.
So when the plan was submitted to us, there was no violation of the ordinance at the time. So when the plan they submitted showed us was in compliance, but when it was actually built and the foundation survey was done, the foundation had been put into the setback, which is not what the plan originally reflected when we approved it.
Oh, okay, so the permit was submitted, the building was built, a CO was issued, and then subsequent to the issuance of the CO, it was discovered that the building was in the setback?
Yeah, I mean, as far as inspection goes, I don't know if they missed it or it was just something that they overlooked. As far as issuing after the final inspection, it should have been caught ahead of that. I mean, it should have been caught during that time. I can't speak to why they didn't catch it, but it was built, the setback.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for attorney, if you'll just give me a little bit of leeway on this one.
What he said is not accurate.
Wait, I'm sorry. The city approved this in error. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. I was rereading it. That is my fault. The city did approve this in error.
We need to, first of all, change your screen back because we can see all of the chats.
Sorry about that.
I just wanted to get that going.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Cole. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yes, that is incorrect. The city did approve this in error. I can't speak to why,
okay.
But it was built within approval and inspected and approved by us. I got this confused with another case next month, so I apologize for that. So I don't have anything else to say.
All right. And Chad, do you have a question for Krista?
I do for Krista or Brian, whomever. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, hypothetically, that this board does not approve a variance. Does that mean that this structure that the city CO'd now has to be altered? I just want to understand the ramifications of today's decision.
Sure. Krista Kukra, City Attorney's Office. So yes, it would have to come into compliance. I mean, a homeowner, applicant, whatever the case may be, doesn't have necessarily any sort of vested rights, if you will, in an approval that is not compliant with the code. So yeah, I think Cole said there was an error here. The board is to consider kind of what's before it. If it's not approved, the property does have to be in compliance.
All right, Mike, do you have a question? Aaron?
Thank you. Yeah, two questions. One, and perhaps I'm not sure if this is for planning or perhaps the applicant, but is the building itself in the additional encroachment, or is it just the footing for the building?
I'll let I believe it's the house itself, because it is the footing. but it, like I said, it's already 0.2 foot into the setback, so it's just an additional 0.8 of a foot. But the house and the foundation are both in the setback.
Okay. And then regarding the drainage ditch in the rear of the property, I'm assuming there aren't any buffers or no build setbacks or anything associated with that. It appears to be somewhat of a feature that winds through the neighborhood here.
Right, that's correct. There's no build setback or any buffers associated with that ditch. I think it's mainly shown just to show that there's a topographical element back there.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Cole before we hear from the applicant? All right. Would the applicant like to give us a little rundown? Mary, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So I purchased 909 Hale Street in 2019. The house was built in the 1920s and already existed within the setback. The kitchen and bathroom were part of an addition done in a later period and had some pretty extensive issues with it, water damage, insect infestation, and the foundation was sloping. In 2021, we started the process of fixing that and adding on to the house so that I could maintain this house built in the 20s as part of the neighborhood and bring it up to better standards than it was in. We applied for that building permit in May of 2021 and received it May 28th. Construction began, was approved by the planning department, and inspections, including foundation inspection, were passed. My lender did require a survey, which we did not receive until most of construction was done in December of 2021. So that's why I'm before you, is that called out that we were over the setback despite the building permits and things like that. The increase into the setback is a matter of inches. It's a de minimis increase, I'd say. And so I'm before you trying to make this right, since we did rely in good faith on building permits issued by the city. And it has been built to match those permits. There was no increase in the encroachment or anything like that. It does match what the city approved originally.
All right, Mary, would you like all of your testimony today to be part of the record?
Sure.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Chad.
Thank you. Good morning. I had a question about an attachment to your application. And this is the foundation survey that was dated October 27th, 2021. And in looking at that foundation survey, it looked like the existing single family dwelling, the one that was built in the 20s, already encroached into the setback. Is that, am I looking at that
That's
correctly?
correct.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. And then, so when you were doing your addition, you simply continued the existing perimeter line of the structure in a straight line. And you did that because you weren't aware that the house was already encroaching into the setback. Is that how it
that's
went?
basically the situation. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And then it was approved by the city, so we continued with those plans.
Right. Right. And this is already existing, right? I mean, this is built space. It's already enclosed and its living area now. Is that?
I'm sitting in it right now. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. And could you talk a little bit about how, let's just assume for the sake of argument that that you knew that the home was encroaching into the setback before the structure was enclosed. Would you talk a little bit about the measures that you would have taken had you known about that and whether or not that would have had some impact on your construction? I'm looking for some rationale about
Sure.
the setback and what you could have done to meet it and whether or not that was a possibility.
Yeah. And so I'll answer about as best I can, and then Cam Hill, who's my father and the builder on this project, can answer probably as well. But it would have caused kind of an awkward layout. The house is kind of shotgun style, and we kind of maintained that with the existing living area. But moving it over to meet the 6 feet variance would have been this weird layout in the kitchen. We would have probably had to take out one of the shade trees in the backyard, which I know is also a requirement in my neighborhood that right now we were able to preserve based on the layout. And then the ditch, it's not really clear on the survey, and I apologize for that, but we would have essentially been running straight into the ditch. So we would have lost a considerable amount of square feet or had to mitigate the drainage issues in another way and cover it up.
Okay, so just to be clear, meeting the setback requirement would have created some additional construction issues and potentially created problems with the drainage ditch.
Yeah, and I mean, most likely we would have had to come before you and apply for a variance either way due to the drainage ditch and the shade tree, loss of the shade tree required meant in my neighborhood.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, one question. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application?
I would like to.
Please.
I'm Cam Hill. I'm Mac's dad, and I'm also the builder. I applied for the permit in May. And the plans have always shown that the building, the addition and the existing house were where they are. They always showed it in the setback. The city of Durham has approved it at initial application. Inspectors have been on site 5 or 6 times, and each time it never was an issue. The only reason we're before you is because there's the blot on the title because of the house being in the setback. The point at which it became an issue, the house was already nearly complete and it's been completed. It would just be funny looking to have adjusted to the setback. It would have been out of keeping with the neighborhood. And the previous applicant, the lady who wanted to build the house, she found out when she submitted her plans for approval that it was in violation of the setback. We weren't given that opportunity. I mean, we didn't realize that this was a problem because the city of Durham didn't tell us. It's just sort of that simple. The encroachment is an existing condition that is not increased by a significant amount. And so it's, everybody wonders why we're here, but we are here because there's the blot on the title and we need to correct that.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Retchless?
Hi, Chair Rogers, Retchless. I don't know if this question is maybe for planning, but isn't a survey required to pull a permit?
Jessica Dockery with the Planning Department. Yes, there would have been a plot plan. This was just missed at the time of review.
So it was just a failure to
Yes, sir.
Oversee that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mike. All right. Is there anyone here to speak against this application for variance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. Any discussion? Thoughts?
We would have, had they known about this, we would have been sitting here talking about the variance. So had that been caught, this would have come before us and we would have talked about it. And we would have debated about whether or not, 0.6 of an inch or 0.8 of a foot or whatever that de minimis amount is constituted something that we were okay with or not. It was missed. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have to get a variance. I mean, yeah, the city missed it, but that doesn't make it okay that there's a variance there, or that there was an encroachment. Because it's built now, I don't know how comfortable I am asking the applicant to come back and tear out existing floor area. You know, I'm uncomfortable doing that. I am moved by the fact that the structure was in the setback from the outset, that they were in good faith attempting to maintain the exterior perimeter of the structure in a good and workmanlike manner, and that compels me. So the fact that the space is here, the fact that you know, the amount of the encroachment isn't necessarily drastic, the fact that the applicant maybe could have known, should have known, but didn't know, but the city didn't inform them. I think all of these things kind of conspire. I'm going to support this variance, but I surely wish that this hadn't been missed. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
I'm comfortable with the applicant's request. Even if they had come in prior to construction, I think what they're doing makes sense. It's continuing the line of the existing house. Anything else doesn't make sense. And so, and it just happens, granting the variance would clear up a mistake. But even if no construction had happened, I think a variance in this situation would be reasonable. Very sorry the applicants had to go through this.
Thank you, David.
That's all.
Mike Tarrant.
I agree with much of what Mr. Meadows and Mr. Valletta have said. You know, for certainly sympathetic to the applicant and the situation they're in, and you know, I think, you know, people do overlook things, and so it's hard to not take into consideration that the building is complete into our decision. But you know, I think many of us on this board support renovating and using existing structures versus tearing them down in new construction, especially in these older neighborhoods of Durham. So I appreciate you doing that. I think the challenge is with building additions is to make them look attractive and not look like they're building additions, right? And so I think responsibly you've continued the plane of the, I guess it's the eastern or the northern facade. And you had an existing nonconformity, right, which is a hardship of sorts in its own right. And by continuing that plane and the angle of the building sitting on the property, it's only become worse because you continued that plane. I think it was 0.8 of a foot or something like that, maybe less than 10 inches, right? Which is, for all intents and purposes, the section of a wall from the drywall to the studs, the sheathing and facade material. So to me, it's negligible. It wouldn't even be noticeable in my opinion. And so I feel like that having been said, the spirit and the intent of the ordinance has been maintained here as to the extent practical by the applicant, and I'm inclined to support this application.
Jessica Major.
Thank you. I intend to vote yes, but I wanted to be clear that it's not necessarily because of the procedural history of what's happened here, but because of the necessary findings for variance, the unnecessary hardship. And I believe that all 4 other requirements that we must find in order to vote yes have been met here.
All right. Anyone else? I'll share, you know, Mike, you did a good job of summarizing exactly what I was thinking on this. So ditto. I hate to say that word. But anyway. All right. Does anybody want to offer a motion for this?
Chair Rogers, this is Retchless. I'd like to make a motion, please.
Go ahead, Mike.
That case number B22000004, an application for a request for a variance from a side yard setback on property located at 909 Hell Street, has successfully met the applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance and is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. The improvements shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Retchless for approval. Is there a second?
Meadows, second.
Meadows on the second.
Hey.
Take it away.
Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Richless,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
Tarrant.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Vote of 7-0. Your request for a variance has been approved. Sorry for the process you guys have been through, but I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good day. All right, we've got 2 more cases on the docket here. Do we want to take a quick 5-minute break? Is that appropriate? 10? Which one you want? 5? All right, let's go at 5 minutes. It is 10:05. We'll reconvene at 10:10. See you all then. All right, it looks like we're all back. Terry, would you like to call the next case?
Okay, this is case B 22000005. It's a city case. It's a request for a variance from a riparian buffer and no build setbacks. The subject site is located at 312 East Umstead Street and 1206 Dawkins Street, and it's zone RU-MD, and it's at the urban tier. This case has been advertised for the required period of time, and notarized affidavits are on file, and signed postings are on file, and the letters are on file in the planning department. Seated for this case is Kip, Meadows, Paletta, Rogers, Retchless, Major, and Tarrant.
All right. If you plan to give testimony, we'll need your camera on. I think we've got everybody. If you'll please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Howard?
Yes, I do.
Peter?
Oh, this is Howard. Peter had a conflict and had to leave early. He's going to try and get back, but it may just be me.
Okay. All right then. Well, Howard, do you consent to this remote meeting platform?
Yes, I do.
All right. Well, Peter, just in case you are here, do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? You'll have to unmute yourself. Just go ahead and swear you in. Okay, or not. There you are.
And a deconfliction. He's speaking of Peter Skiller, who's one of the project principals, and I'm just a neighbor.
Okay. Do you plan on giving testimony?
I'd like to.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And do you consent to this remote meeting platform?
I do.
All righty then. Thank you. Cole, do you have, is this one yours?
They're all mine.
They're all yours.
So let me get to. Good morning again. I'm Cole Reniger, representing the planning department. Planning staff requested the staff report and all materials submitted to the public hearing to be made part of the public record with any necessary corrections as noted.
So noted, thank you.
Case B 22000005, a request for variance from riparian buffer and no build setback standards. The case area is highlighted in red. The site is in the urban tier, zoned residential urban multifamily, RUMD, and is within the city of Durham's jurisdiction. The existing use is an apartment and vacant residential. Howard A. Parton, the applicant, requests a variance from the riparian buffer standards. His property is located in the residential urban M RUMD zone district and is within the urban development tier. Unified Development Ordinance UDO section 8.5.12 requires any person who wishes to undertake a prohibited use in a riparian buffer apply for variance. UDO section 8.5.9C requires that any other buildings or other features that require grading or construction shall be set back at least 10 feet from the edge of the riparian buffer. The applicant is requesting a variance of a maximum of 4 feet 4 inches encroachment into the riparian buffer and the full no build setback for wood, deck, sidewalk, and elevator tower. in order to meet the requirements for riparian buffer variance. All requirements found in the UDO section 8.5.12.3b must be met. Staff will be available for questions throughout the hearing process. Staff would also like to mention that is different from the case before. This is not the city buffer, but the state buffer of the 50-foot requirement.
Thanks for pointing that out. Any questions for staff? Chad?
Good morning. Thank you. Cole, a couple of questions for you, because I wanted to be sure that I understood what was happening here. You talked about UDO section 8.5.12 variances, and more specifically 8.5.12b variances located outside of the Neuse River Basin. Is that right? Yes?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. And is this a minor variance or is this a major variance?
This is a minor variance.
This is a minor variance.
Well, there's not a difference. We don't have major and minor variances. But as far as the stream goes, there is minor and major variances. So, but in this case is a minor stream variance.
Okay. Okay. So this is subject to 8.5.12b1 minor variance. Okay.
Right. And also, if it was a major, this board would not hear it. It would actually go to city council. So.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you for that. I had a question about that. So now my second question. In looking at section 8.5.12b, section 3 of that is variance requirements. And there are 3 parts to this, an A, B, and a C. And it says that we have to have 3 findings of fact to determine if the variance requirements are met. Under A of that section, it says there are practical difficulties, necessary hardships that prevent compliance with the riparian buffer protection requirements. The following criteria must all be met in order to make such a finding. So under A are 6 different criteria. And is it correct that each and every one of these 6 items under A must be met? Is that, am I thinking about that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And the staff report said, unless I misread it, that this application does not meet criteria number 5. The applicant did not purchase the property after the effective date of this ordinance and then request a variance. So what I heard you say was you have to meet all 6 criteria, but the staff report says this application doesn't meet criteria number 5. Am I interpreting that correctly?
That's correct, because it was purchased after the zoning ordinance was enacted.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions for Cole? All right, seeing none. Would the applicant like to come forward and give us a little information about the case?
Yes, I would.
And Howard, would you like all of your testimony today to be part of the record?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think it should be.
All right, yeah, that's just a weird question I guess we have to ask. Would you, we'll turn it over to you for a moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Peter Skillern of Reinvestment Partners had a conflict. He left me a brief message to the board. I'd like to read that to you. It's just a couple paragraphs. And he says that Reinvestment Partners is a nonprofit community development corporation based in Durham, and it is working to preserve the historic Harriet Tubman YWCA and provide affordable housing at 312 East Umstead. And we are pleased to be making progress in securing regulatory approval and raising the necessary funds for redevelopment. Due to revisions to the plan required by the North Carolina State Office of Historic Preservation, we are seeking a variance to allow the placement of an elevator at the rear of the building rather than the center of the building. And we thank you for your thoughtful consideration and support. So,
well, unfortunately, Howard, I don't think we can take that.
I'm sorry.
We can take your testimony. You know, if Peter had something to say, he should have been at this meeting for his case. But we'll turn looks like he is here. It's in the attendees. Chris, do you want to promote him? Or can I do that?
I moved him over, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Peter, we'll need it for you to give some testimony today. We'll need you to have your camera on and unmuted. Let me go through here. We'll need to administer the oath to you too, sir. If you'll raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And do you consent to this remote meeting platform?
I do.
Thank you. So if you'd like to, if you want to give in your words, have any information you want, I don't know which one that you or Howard wants to kind of be the main person in contact as the applicant.
I'll simply do the introduction and then hand it over to Howard. I want to apologize for being late. Thank you very much for your consideration of this variance request. Reinvestment Partners is a nonprofit agency whose mission is to promote healthy and just communities by working with people, places, and policy. As a part of that community development work, we purchased the Harriet Tubman YWCA as an important historic landmark for Durham's history and as an anchor for helping to redevelop a distressed neighborhood. Our goal is to take this from a condemned building into one that's a contribution to the neighborhood and providing 15 affordable housing units. As we have gone through the various regulatory processes, the use of federal funds required us to have a review by the North Carolina State Office of Historic Preservation. And in that process, they said that it was of a historic significance and that to maintain that, to use federal funds, we would need to maintain the appearance from the front as much as possible, which required us to relocate an elevator that we had installed on the outside for accessibility issues to the rear. When we put that into the rear of the building, unfortunately, that triggered a review because we had then moved outside the existing building footprint that had been previously approved by the Board of Adjustments, the Planning Commission, and the Plant City staff. So the particulars of that request and how that impacts the Unified Development Ordinance, I'm going to turn over to our landscape architect, Howard Partner. Howard?
Thank you, Peter. Okay. So just to give a little background, as Cole Reniger told you, we were before the Board of Adjustments back in May of last year to request a variance to reduce the width of landscape buffers. And at the same time, we had made a request to the Planning Department for a no practical alternative application to allow an existing intermittent stream to be routed through a culvert, as is shown on the drawing in front of you. And the application was approved, and we were allowed to disturb 5,744 square feet of stream buffer in order to build the driveway, the culvert, and to do buffer plantings alongside the driveway. So the stream itself was effectively removed and replaced by a culvert, but according to the North Carolina state regulations, the stream buffer remained in place even though the stream itself was already impacted by the proposed driveway and culvert. So at that time, we also had a rezoning development plan was approved by the City Council in April of 2021. And we proceeded with a site plan submittal, which was approved by the Planning Department in May 2021. So at that time, we thought we had done all of our approvals and we were all ready to go. But as Peter mentioned, in working with the North Carolina State Historic Preservation Office, they determined that the elevator, which we had shown in the center of the building created a visual impact that was not compatible with the 1950s style of the building. And we were asked to put our elevator at the back of the building rather than in the center where it was visible from the street. So, as shown on the drawing in front of you, we moved the elevator tower to the back corner of the building. And in this location, the combined elevator tower, a wood deck, and a sidewalk entrance impacted 169 square feet of stream buffer. So this would be in addition to the 5,744 square feet of stream buffer that was already approved through the no practical alternative application process. So because the stream buffer is reduced primarily by the relocation of the elevator tower, and the stream buffer reduction is not allowed to be approved through the no practical alternative procedure, we are before the board to request a variance to reduce the stream buffer area by 169 square feet. Because the affected area of the stream buffer is right next to the old YWCA building and adjacent houses, there's really very little undisturbed natural environment in existence here, which would protect water quality, so that the small amount of exclusion from the stream buffer that we're asking for really has no measurable or detectable impact on water quality. And so we're asking you to approve the variance. I want to make a final comment, and that is regarding the discussion you had with Cole that the applicant repurchased the property after the effective date of the ordinance and then requested a variance. In the same list of requirements for the variance, there's also a statement regarding burden of proof and general findings that says that the act of purchasing property with knowledge that circumstances may exist that may justify granting a variance shall not be regarded as a self-created hardship. So in the list of requirements to be met in order to obtain a variance, we have what are essentially two conflicting requirements here. One that says that the applicant purchased a property after the effective date of the ordinance requiring a stream buffer, and the other one saying that the act of purchasing property with knowledge of circumstances that may exist does not justify denying a variance. So we're really we're looking at just a very small reduction in stream buffer, and it's a situation where the stream has already been removed itself. The stream is to be replaced by a culvert pipe, and this impact is kind of a technicality because it really doesn't have any significant impact on water quality here. And so we're asking for this variance so that we can proceed.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant? All right, Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like I need a compass on this one. Let me try to unwind this so that I get this square in my head. There was a stream. There's buffers with the stream. The stream was put in a pipe in a different location, but the stream buffer stayed, even though the stream wasn't there anymore. Then you needed to put an elevator on the structure. the people funding the project wouldn't let you put an elevator or structure in the front, so you had to put it in the back. That put it in the buffer for the stream that wasn't there anymore. Now you need a variance to have the elevator in the buffer that for a stream that isn't there anymore. Okay, that's crazy. I need to understand, for the purposes of the variance, why the elevator is in the buffer instead of a different location. So please, if you could speak to that, about why the elevator shaft is where it is instead of in a location outside of the buffer or in a location that is less in the buffer than it is. Also, the deck. Why is the deck there? Why does the deck have to be in the buffer? Those two things, hearing some evidence or testimony about that would be helpful to think about the criteria. But I'll note that, the staff report already says you got to meet all 6 criteria. You don't meet number 5. So I'm not sure, the point that you raise about the conflicting things is an issue for sure. I get that. I think at the end of the day, if there's 2 conflicting requirements, the board, still, I'm not sure that our path is that clear. But I definitely would like to hear more about why the elevator shaft is where it is, why the deck is there, and how those locations are where it needs to be instead of outside of the buffer for the stream that doesn't exist anymore. Thank you.
I can respond to the elevator piece, Howard. So where we had proposed it, there's the way that the building is structured, there's a 3-story building and then there's a 1-story wraparound. And so we have to create a second interior stairwell, and we want to provide handicap accessibility to all floors. And that driver of providing accessibility led us to provide a tower on the side of the 3-story building next to the 1-story. And it looked good. It was glassed in, it was gorgeous, but it didn't meet historic preservation requirements, which are an essential element of receiving the federal funds necessary to build this affordable housing. So the only place that the elevator can go is next to where we've placed it, which would allow it to have this access to an existing interior stairwell as well. So there's really no other place to put that elevator to provide handicapped accessibility in the building. So that's why that's there. The deck is not a requirement. It is an amenity to be able to better enjoy the property for the residents.
Okay, I would add that I'm not even sure that the wood deck conflicts with the stream buffer requirement, because it's a raised wood deck and it's not totally impervious. Because it's a wood deck and water will fall through it. So that's all I really have to say about the deck.
All right. Mike Tarrant, did you have a question, or was that answered?
I just had a question whether the deck was on grade or raised, and Mr. Partner answered that. I appreciate it.
Got it. All right. Any other questions for the applicant, Chad?
One more follow-up, just so that I'm clear, and maybe this is for the staff. Staff, if this wood deck goes in the location that's been proposed, is it necessary to have a variance to accommodate just the wood deck?
One moment. Sorry. I don't believe if the deck is raised, I think it still requires a even if it is raised, it still requires a variance. Yeah, sorry.
I would just can I add one point of information?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to note that the wood deck, I think, is about 10 by 12 feet, but only about 60 square feet of the wood deck are within the stream buffer area. Most of the wood deck is outside of it.
Okay. Did anyone else have a question for the applicants? All right, is there anyone else to speak in favor of this application for a variance? Seeing, Peter, would you like to say a few things?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, board members, city management. My name is Peter Crispo. I'm a licensed civil engineer in North Carolina. I'm the executive director of Jubilee Creations, a 501c3 organization operating in the neighborhood of the project. I'm a homeowner and neighbor of the project. I live at 401 East Umstead Street. I'm also speaking on behalf of other owners of 2 other proximate or adjacent properties to the project. So I'm heavily invested in the neighborhood and in the project. I participated in the public neighborhood meeting, which Reinvestment Partners held last week. I've reviewed the drawings provided at that meeting. I have not reviewed applicable ordinances or zoning guidance, but from my perspective, this variance makes sense, and we enthusiastically support the applicant's efforts to alleviate the shortage of affordable housing in Durham. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, anyone else to speak in favor? Not seeing anyone here to speak against this application for a variance. Seeing none there, we'll bring it back to the table. Again, variance, no staff recommendation. Thoughts from board members? Mike, Terrence?
This is kind of weird to me. You know, I look at this site, the stream that has the associated buffer does not exist north of this property. It appears to me that pipes were draining onto this property and over time created a stream-like feature that now warrants a buffer because of today's ordinance requirements. When you follow this feature down, it's piped at the south end of the property under Burnett, opens up, it's piped again across Spalding Elementary, it opens up, it pipes again, it does it several times before it dumps into Third Fork Creek down and around Forest Hills Park. So we're really at the tip of this feature. And as was brought up earlier, that feature is now going away because of what we approved a year ago. So I guess what I'm saying is I feel like this is a man-made hardship that we're dealing with here as it relates to the stream buffer. Not trying to discount the stormwater requirements associated with riparian buffers and so forth, but just some things I've been considering as I've been listening here this morning. The other thing I'm wrestling with are the points about the funding and the tax credits and so forth, as well as the timing of the purchase of property. And where I have some pause is that the development world is not as predictable as everyone expects it or thinks it is. And, opportunities change, situations change, dynamics change, you name it. I think we've all experienced it through this pandemic, especially. So I feel like we need to be somewhat nimble in that regard. So I'm kind of on the fence still. I would appreciate thoughts from other board members and as far as what they feel on this particular case. Thank you.
Thank you. Chad?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Mr. Tarrant. I probably would go a little bit further and ask the question why there's a mapped buffer for a stream that got culverted. I don't understand why the buffer is still there. I understand that it is the fact that the buffer is still there that's triggering this requirement for a variance, which is why we're here today. So I too appreciate riparian buffer requirements and stormwater requirements and water quality protection provisions and all of the things that we have in the ordinance. And I know why they're there. I don't understand why we're applying them in this instance, in that that which we are protecting is no longer present. So I don't understand why the buffer is still there. Having said that, I appreciate, the intent of fixing this structure. I think that's awesome. I appreciate the provision of affordable housing. I think that's awesome. I think that those are both laudable and important goals. And I think that, that's part of this decision is recognizing that the importance of that. In fact, we approved a variance for culverting this stream because of those important goals. So now here we are after time has passed, the stream is moved or will be moved. The buffer didn't get moved. It's still there. Now we've got to go through another variance for that. I think the part that troubles me is that there's material in the staff report that says that this application doesn't meet the criteria that we say have to be met. And I'm not sure how we solve that problem. I'm hoping that someone smarter than I can tell me, I would like to approve this variance because I don't understand why we're requiring a variance for a stream buffer that the stream is gone. At the same time, the evidence that we've got in the record at this point says this application doesn't meet the criteria. So I'm worried about that. And I'm hoping that somebody can allay my concerns about that issue, because I think this is a good project. I'd like to approve this variance. I'm worried that if we did that, we would be doing it in the face of evidence that says we shouldn't be approving it. So somebody please help me get okay with this.
David.
The staff is not the Board of Adjustment. The staff does not make the findings of fact. We do. Now, of course, the staff are the professionals and we need to listen to them carefully, but ultimately it's our decision. So I'm, in the total scheme of things, I'm not overly concerned that on occasion we may differ, we may interpret things differently than staff. So.
Thanks, David. Anyone else? All right.
I would also, this, still being a relatively new member of the board, this is one of the more compelling cases that has come before me, where we have a huge dilapidated structure that has historic value, that is a huge negative. And we have a creative way to turn the biggest negative in the neighborhood into something really positive that's consistent with both helping the neighborhood, but also part of the larger needs of the city to create more affordable housing. And so I see this as one of the most compelling cases that I've come across so far.
Well put, David. Anyone else? All right. Does anyone want to offer a motion for this case? Mr. Retchless?
I hereby make a motion that case number B2200005, an application for request for a variance from riparian buffer and no build setback requirements on property located at 312 East Umstead Street, has successfully met the applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance and is hereby granted subject to the following conditions: that improvement shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application.
We have a motion by Mike Retchless for approval. Excuse me. Is there a second?
Second.
David Paletta on the second.
Yes. Kip.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. Meadows.
Yes.
Okay. Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
Tarrant.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right, by a vote of 7-0, your request for variance has been approved. Wish you the best of luck. Hopefully this is the last time you come before the BOA for this case, huh? Hate that you've been stuck in this process. All right, let's move on to our next and final case on the agenda. Terry, you want to call it?
Yes, it's on B22-00006. It's a city case. It's a request for a variance from the sidewalk and to build zone requirement. The city site is located at 320 West Morgan Street, and it's zoned downtown, I guess, DD-Z and downtown tier. This case has been advertised for the required period of time. Notarized affidavits verifying the sign postings and letter mailings are on file. And seated for this case is Kip, Meadows, Paletta, Rogers, Retchless, Major, and Tarrant.
All right. If you plan on giving testimony today, we'll need to have your camera on and get this ready. Administer the oath. If you will raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Kelsey, this looks like Patrick Biker.
Yes. Hey, Chairman Rogers, Patrick Biker, and Kelsey Westwood are together at the Kimley Horn office today and ready to be sworn in.
All right. Is Kelsey giving testimony as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just asked, but do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Kelsey?
I do.
Patrick?
Yes, sir.
Earl? I didn't.
Hi, Jacob. Yep, I'm here. I don't necessarily intend to give testimony, but here in case I do.
Well, just in case you do, we'll still have to, regardless of, if you do, you'll have to be sworn in. So
Okay.
do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give today is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. And do you consent to this remote meeting platform?
I do.
Patrick Biker?
Yes, sir.
Kelsey Westwood?
Yes.
All righty. Cole, we'll turn it back over to you.
All right.
Looks like we don't have Maria.
One more. Good morning again. I'm Cole Renninger, representing the Planning Department. Planning staff requests that the staff report and all materials submitted at the public hearing to be made part of the public record with any necessary corrections as noted.
So noted. Thank you.
B22-00006 is a request from the sidewalk and build to zone requirements. The case area is highlighted in red. The site is in the downtown tier, zoned downtown design core, DDC, and is within the city of Durham's jurisdiction. The existing use is vacant commercial. Earl P. Gill Jr., applicant representing Craig Davis Properties, requests a variance from the sidewalk and build to zone requirements. The property is located in the downtown design core, DDC zoning district, and in the downtown development tier. Unified Development Ordinance UDO section 16.2.1A.1 requires a build to zone of 12 to 18 feet. The applicant is requesting along approximately 2/3 of the build to zone width. The variance would create a build to zone that ranges up almost to 9 feet further back from the allowed build to zone along Morris Street. The applicant also requests a variance from UDO section 12.4.2, which requires sidewalk from building face to back of curb. The applicant is proposing that instead of the 30 feet wide sidewalk along Rooney Street, a 6-foot, 6.5 inches wide landscaping strip between the buffer and curb be allowed. Staff will be available for questions throughout the hearing process.
All right, thank you, Cole. Any questions for Cole before we continue? Mike Tarrant?
Hey, Cole, I just had a question. It looks like, the proposed plan has quite a bit of retaining walls and steps along the Morris Street facade. Do those not qualify for any type of frontage type or some other element that would satisfy the build to requirement?
So no, those aren't considered part of the building itself. So the build to zone is strictly for the frontage of the building to be up to the street, not the other elements that are associated here.
Thank you.
All right, next, Chad Meadows.
Thank you. So Cole, just generally speaking, obviously design is very subjective. We often have cases in downtown that seek deviations or variances from the design requirements. Obviously, that's a very important intersection. This is a very important space in the city. My question to you is, we only see the cases where some sort of deviation is sought. And it's not entirely clear to me that the preponderance of cases that come downtown don't need variances, or the preponderance of cases that come into downtown do need variances. I understand it calls for a little bit of speculation, but generally speaking, in your opinion, in your interpretation, do we see more cases coming to downtown that can meet standards, or is the request for a variance much more common?
I would say that there's a fair amount that do not meet ordinances. I can't give specific numbers.
Understand.
Generally, senior planner staffs are the ones that review these. So I would say there is still a significant amount that don't need a variance, but there is a significant amount that do need a variance. I think it's probably about 50-50 in my opinion, based on just, it does seem like there is small deviations that have to be met in the design district that are sometimes hard to meet. So I can't say for instance, but I would say at least 50-50, if not more, on the meeting requirement side than the variance side.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
All right, any other questions for staff? All right, would the applicants like to come forward?
Yes, good morning, Chairman Rogers, members of the board. My name is Patrick Biker with Morningstar Law Group. Our office address is 700 West Main Street here in Durham. I'm here today representing Craig Davis Properties for these two variance requests. At this time, Chairman Rogers, I would like to have my resume, which is Exhibit A, and the resume for Kelsey Westwood, a professional engineer with Kimley Horn, entered into the record as duly qualified witnesses. The other exhibits are Exhibit D is the colorized site plan that Cole just shared with you, and we'll go back to that for the majority of our testimony. And then Exhibit E is a Google Earth shot that I took recently, which was probably the maximum of my technology graphic representation skills. But that is the existing intersection of Roney and Morris, showing what the north edge of the parking deck looks like today. So briefly, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to go through Exhibit A, which is my resume. I graduated from North Carolina University School of Law in 1992. I then graduated from the Department of City and Regional Planning with a master's degree in 1994. I've been practicing real estate development law for about 27 years, the majority of it in Durham, but have worked on cases from the mountains to the coast in North Carolina during that time. Also have the LEED AP certification, and obviously have had the pleasure of appearing before this board on many occasions over the last 25 years. My role on this team for Craig Davis Properties was to work on the application, then review everything that we submitted. Of course, the site plan, the staff report, and the attachments that we just looked at regarding this site that is in the downtown design district core zoning district. Really, the site we're talking about today is along the west and the northwest corner of a 1.75 acre parking deck that's located on the north side of Morgan Street to the west of Morris. This is, of course, is directly across from the Arts Center, the Carolina Theater, and the Convention Center. I did serve for many years as chairman of the Convention Center Authority. And I do want to emphasize that this parking deck was built back in the mid-1980s. I believe it was 1984. It would not be an exaggeration for me to say that I have personally parked in this parking deck hundreds or thousands of times, and so I know it very, very well. In terms of the variance request, we're first going to go through the Bill 2 line, and I'll address finding number 1. Then turn it over to Kelsey Westwood, who will provide competent material and substantial evidence on findings 2 and 3. And then I'll conclude our presentation by addressing finding 4. After that, I'll give a quick summary. And to kick this off, Cole, would you please go back to Exhibit D, which is the colorized site plan? Thank you, sir. The reasons for the variance: Craig Davis property seeks to construct a new tower above the western half of this almost 40-year-old parking deck in compliance with the permitted uses in the downtown design core zoning district. Due to the requirement relating to the percent of building placement along the street frontage, it would be an unreasonable hardship to have to construct a building meeting these downtown design district core zoning requirements, given the odd shape of this parcel. The odd shape results from the skewed intersection of Morris and Morgan Streets. As you can see on this slide, it's a skewed angle that creates the need for this hearing before the board this morning. Again, I have to confess, even though I drove through this intersection thousands of times over the past 27 years, I did not realize this was not a 90-degree angle. And so for the following reasons, I want to address why UDO finding number 1 is met. Again, finding number 1 is that unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. It shall not be necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of the variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. In this case, unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance because it would require Craig Davis Properties to reconfigure its proposed building to meet the skew angled intersection of Morris and Morgan Streets. The increase in construction costs due to conforming to a skew angled build-to line would be unreasonable. I believe the angle is it Kelsey, 86 degrees?
Yeah, 86
I've never seen an 86-degree angle on a building before, and I hope I never do. So the current parking deck at the corner of Morgan and Morris Street was built, again, back in 1984. There were completely different zoning regulations in place for Durham at that time, especially in downtown Durham. So that's why the parking deck was built the way it was, and it simply does not mesh with the requirements today. The current UDO regulations relating to the build-to line in section 16.2.1A1, as Cole said, require a build-to line of 12 to 18 feet. This current requirement assumes the development of a vacant site with streets that intersect at a right angle. And so in reality, on this site, there's more than a 35-year-old parking deck, and it's not possible to build a structure with right angles along Morris Street if the current build-to lines are followed. And you can see those on this exhibit in red. Accordingly, I also need to add there'd be accessibility issues that we think would be insurmountable in order to create a new structure that's ADA compliant. Accordingly, the strict application of the UDO is based on a somewhat arbitrary requirement that does not account for certain factual characteristics that I just described to the board. And so that wraps up my testimony on finding number 1. And now I'll turn it over to Kelsey Westwood, our site engineer, to provide testimony on findings 2 and 3.
Thank you, Patrick. Exhibit B lists my experience and qualifications, which I'll go through briefly. My name is Kelsey Westwood Hall, and I'm a civil engineer with Kinley Horn. I've worked at Kinley Horn for over 6 years and have been a civil engineer for 8 years. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, and am a professional engineer licensed by the state of North Carolina. My role on the team, I was brought in as part of our project team to prepare site due diligence and to work with Patrick Biker to prepare the variance application that we submitted to the planning department on behalf of Craig Davis Properties. In preparing to testify for this public hearing, I've reviewed all submitted materials, including the application, site plan, staff report, and its attachments for the development of this multifamily development within the downtown design district. I will now address the second finding required in UDO section 3.14.8 that the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property. First, to amplify what Patrick said, it is a unique condition to have a skewed parcel approximately 86 degrees in the downtown design district. This condition results from the skewed intersection at Morgan and Morris Streets, and therefore the shape of the parcel is a hardship that is peculiar to this property. It's also a peculiar condition of this parcel to have significant grade change along Morris and Roney Streets, in addition to street frontages that do not intersect at a right angle. There is actually approximately 20 feet of grade change between the intersection of Morris and Roney to the edge of the parcel along Morgan Street, which is fairly significant, especially in a small site like this one. This further makes it a hardship to comply with the current Build 2 requirements. Accordingly, it is the location in the downtown design district and the size, due to the rather unique shape and topography of the parcel, that drive this hardship due to conditions specific to the parcel. Given that the parking deck was built in the mid-1980s and the existing conditions of the parcel are unique, it is clear that the hardship did not result from any actions taken by Craig Davis Properties. Moreover, none of the conditions on this property that are the subject of this variance resulted from any actions taken by the applicant. I'll turn it back over to Patrick.
Thank you, Kelsey. I would like to briefly address the fourth finding that the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. In regards to the intent of the ordinance, this development is in accordance with a host of requirements in the downtown design district. The proposed development certainly is in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance, as it furthers a more dense development in accordance with what we as a community supported through the lengthy planning process for downtown. It's no secret that the pad site above this parking deck has been in existence since the 1980s, and it's finally moving forward. The downtown design core zoning district was created to stimulate this type of development, mixed use, higher density residential, and we need that to support increased transit and foster efficient land use in the city of Durham. In regards to public safety, the site plan accompanying this variance shows that the appropriate site triangles and accessibility that's sorely needed in relation to the status quo, and which again is making the existing conditions of this 40-year-old parking deck better than they are today. Last, I strongly believe that substantial justice is achieved by granting this variance, as it serves to create an active and attractive streetscape for this part of downtown. And this is a benefit to the residents and visitors of this location. Again, it's very close to the Arts Council, the Carolina Theater, and the Convention Center, and therefore it activates this corner. For all these reasons, public safety is secured, substantial justice is achieved by granting this variance, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. We respectfully ask for your approval. If it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, I thought it'd be better to talk about the Build 2 lines and then talk about the grass strip, which seemed like a very straightforward request, but I defer to your direction on how we address those issues. If you'd like us to keep moving and discuss the grass strip in the sidewalk, which is shown at the top edge of Exhibit D, we're happy to do that as well.
We'll go with whatever you think is appropriate, since you're the one presenting. What would you like to do?
Well, why don't we just finish and go through the grass strip, since that's, I think, the next, since that was obviously mentioned in the staff report. Again, we'll very briefly go through the four findings for the variance, and I appreciate Cole highlighting this in the staff report. Really what we want to do is break up the UDO mandated sidewalk that's in UDO section 12.4.2. That would require a 30-foot wide sidewalk. Cole, would you be so kind as to go to Exhibit E? Yeah, here it is today. You can see what's the sidewalk now there along the edge of the parking deck, and the grass and I think they're magnolia bushes, but that's taxing my landscape architecture skills. What we're trying to do is maintain some pervious surface rather than have it be 100% concrete. And so it is it is our position that unnecessary hardship results from the strict application of the ordinance. Again, the typical downtown sidewalk is 12 to 18 feet wide. It would be unreasonable to require a sidewalk that be approximately 30 feet wide and make it 100% concrete. It just makes sense to break up that 30 feet of concrete with a grass strip as shown on Exhibit D. Would you mind going back to that, Cole? Thanks. Again, want to draw the board's attention to the top edge of this exhibit, and you see the grass strip highlighting green in order to break up the sidewalk. Again, this hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as size and location and topography. Again, it arises from the existing parking deck that was built about 30 feet back from the curb of Roney Street. And the proposed development maintains the existing parking structure, which in turn dictates that the sidewalk would be 30 feet wide. Finding number 3 is that the hardship did not result from any actions taken by Craig Davis Properties. Again, the parking garage was built along the right-of-way for Roney Street back in the 1980s. Obviously, the setbacks in the 1980s were completely different than the build-to lines that are mandated today. And so there was nothing done by the owner or the applicant that had to do with the creation of this hardship. And lastly, the requested variance for this additional strip of grass that's approximately 6.5 feet wide. It's consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the UDO because public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. It's clear just from the cases that the board has handled earlier today, we incentivize pervious surface over impervious surface, and we do everything we can to be good environmental stewards. Accordingly, common sense dictates that, including a 6.5 foot strip of grass and a 30 foot wide sidewalk is a better pedestrian environment and is more environmentally sound than 100% concrete. Again, this excerpt from the site plan you're looking at makes it clear what we hope to construct. And so we hope you will approve this variance in accordance with the findings in UDO section 3.14. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Realize we're the last case on a long agenda. We're happy to answer any questions, and we respectfully ask for your approval.
All right. Any questions for our applicants? Mr. Meadows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, applicants. You guys are always very, very thorough, and I really appreciate that. I know that we often grapple with these downtown design requirements and requests for deviations from those. And it looks like we'll continue as we all try to understand and work within the framework that we've got. So I have 3 or 4 questions that I wanted to pose. So the first one is, I wasn't entirely clear. I understand there's a parking deck there. I understand from the staff report that the parking deck does meet the build-to line that would be required. What I wasn't clear about was whether or not the parking deck is going to be demolished as part of the proposed building, or if the proposed building is just simply to be constructed atop the existing parking garage.
There will be some elements of the parking deck that are demolished, but there's a portion that's kind of highlighted yellow on the left side of that exhibit. That is a portion of the parking deck that's actually was constructed underneath the sidewalk into the right of way on Morris Street. And so that some of the foundation and the structures as part of that piece will not be touched and are going to be built on top of. So there will be something proposed on top of the existing garage, but there will be a little bit of demo involved as well.
It's a challenging reconstruction. There's no way to sugarcoat that. It's a very challenging structure to build on.
Okay. One of the criteria, or one of the rationale that was proposed for towards meeting criteria 2 was a grade differential on the site. That the grade differential makes it difficult to meet the build-to lines. And could you go into a little bit more detail about how and in what ways the grade differential confounds compliance with the build-to line?
Yes, so we have to provide an accessible route to the to the front of the building. And since you can see kind of those planters on the left side, basically it's planters and steps that make up the grade along Morris Street. But in order to get an accessible route from basically the corner of Roney and Morris, we need to set the building back a little bit so that we can let those planters make up the grade and have a smooth transition, from that intersection into the front door of the building.
It's really driven by accessibility issues, ADA, right?
Yes.
Are the planters existing or are they being proposed?
They're being proposed. So basically the planters kind of act as our way of being able to maintain a flat, door of the building and entrance while the grade along the street changes as you go down Morris Street.
Okay. So I'm trying to follow the logic. Please bear with me. I'm not as bright as you guys.
No, you're good.
The planters are being proposed to make sure that accessibility is maintained, but it's the planters that are making the grade of the site such that the build to line can't be met.
So the existing grade, I'm going to use potentially not the exact numbers, but say there's 10 feet of grade change along Morris Street. I think it's somewhere between 10 and 15 feet along Morris Street. Okay. So with the grade change across that street and then the building, we've got to have doors at a similar location to each other. So you've got the building and then the street tilted. And so we've got varying levels of steps along the road. And next to those steps, we just have planters that will be able to make up the grade across, down the road. So basically you've got maybe 5 steps on the northern side of Morris and then 10 steps on the southern side. And we need a little bit more space to push the building back from the street in order to be able to have an accessible route kind of on top of those steps.
Okay.
But I will say part of the strategy of the planters and the steps is to also, meet the intent of the ordinance by having, we don't want to set the building back so far that it doesn't feel like a downtown district. But we're just working with some topography challenges.
Okay. Mr. Biker, I heard you say that reconfiguring the building to meet the 86-degree angle would cost more money. And, 2 hours ago, we turned down an applicant who used cost as a justification. Can you talk a little bit more?
Sure, it's a combination of factors, and I'm happy to have Kelsey amplify it. It's just one of a number of factors that go into the term unreasonable, because unreasonable hardship is what the standard is, and there's a number of factors that go into it. ADA accessibility is one, cost is one, retrofitting an existing parking deck is another. There's a host of factors that go into the term unreasonable. And now Kelsey probably has more detail on that finding.
Yeah, I think even if we were to, I guess in order to actually meet the build to setback the way that it is configured with the lot, your building couldn't be a 90-degree building. So you would need to skew the building as well. And that just creates a lot of additional issues from an architectural side that, I think it feels like there is a solution here that doesn't necessarily involve something to that level.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question for staff, just for my edification, and I can get the answer to this at any point in the discussion. And that is, there was a statement made that the downtown design standards contemplated 90-degree street intersections. I just want to hear from staff that is in fact the case, or that that the downtown design standards can accommodate some building facade that's not at 90 degrees. And I'll take my answer whenever it's convenient. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll wait till Mike Tarrant goes. As he has his hand raised.
Yeah. Mike, you got one?
Thanks. Yeah, just a couple of questions. As it relates to meeting the spirit and the intent of the ordinance, I believe there was a comment in the application that indicated that the building facade would be 60 feet tall and would not be perhaps an appropriate pedestrian scale. Just looking at the context of the area and other design district requirements, I was hoping you could elaborate on why that tall of a facade is not appropriate in this particular case.
I think that sort of goes back to that planter and stair feeling, instead of walking on a sidewalk directly next to a 60-foot building, you've got a little bit of a transition between some steps up to the door, there's planters, and then you've got your 60-foot, adjacent to that. So we're not talking that it's extremely far off.
Right, and we're trying to keep it in the context of the Arts Council, Carolina Theater, and the surrounding buildings. Just, again, obviously harmony with the neighborhood is a special use permit finding, not a variance finding. But nonetheless, we're trying to be very sensitive to the context of how this building will relate to the Carolina Theater and the Arts Council, which I certainly think are treasured Durham institutions, and we want to have something that is in scale commensurate as opposed to significantly taller.
Okay.
Right at the sidewalk. Right at the sidewalk.
Thank you. And then it looks like there's a proposed retaining wall along Roney Street, just south of the grass strip you were discussing earlier. And I was curious if you could kind of describe how the service and loading works based on the exhibit that you presented. It appears like it might exist as it does today and continue to function that way, but just would like some additional clarification on that, please.
Absolutely. Actually, within just the last week, we have tried to reconfigure a lot of things internal to the building to remove that wall, because I think we were just trying to avoid an encroachment. So anyway, that wall will not be proposed in the right way.
Okay. And so how does the loading dock work with the grass strip in front of it?
So they basically would come the way that this is shown, and we're modifying, but basically you'd be parking down to just to the right where the driveway is, and then they have to wheel everything in from there. The truck wouldn't go back to the grass strip.
Okay, thank you. And one final question. If you were to actually design this building at the 86-degree angle and meet the build to requirement, could you still comply with the required site distance triangles at the intersection of Morgan and Morris?
I don't believe it would. And it's, again, this parking deck has been, I think, problematic for downtown Durham for many, many years. And so access and visibility, it was just built in a different era and a different standard, and maybe it even wasn't done as well as it could have been done back in the 1980s. So what I can tell you, Mr. Tarrant, is it'll be a significant improvement in terms of getting people in and out of the parking deck more efficiently and more safely. Do you have anything else?
No, I think that is accurate. I certainly think, although we haven't studied if we built everything to the 86-degree skew to that degree, I think it certainly is fair to say that it would improve sight distance the way we have it designed right now.
Yeah, so that, again, public health and safety is a special use permit standard, but it's obviously something we want to be cognizant of with every project. And so that's, again, why we believe this variance is certainly justified. That would probably fall under finding 4 of the spirit and purpose of the ordinance.
Thank you.
I mean, Chad, to answer your question earlier, it does not have to be a 90-degree right angle there at the building.
Thank you.
And I think the intent of that comment was more that these standards are more easily, more easily met when you have a 90-degree.
Yeah, and obviously we've worked on many of these with the board over the past several years since we brought in design districts, which I think have been a great success for Durham on the whole. However, these build-to lines, I know this is not my first rodeo, and so we've had to deal with these build-to lines in Patterson Place, 9th Street, downtown. They're just They just present certain challenges for certain sites. And I think that's just the reality of it. And again, the spirit and purpose of the ordinance is to create, I think, more efficient and more safe buildings than would occur if the ordinance were strictly followed.
All right. Any other questions for the applicants? Cole, would you mind stop sharing the screen for a moment? All right. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak against this application? Seeing no one. All right. Bring it back to the table here. Any further discussion among the board members? Some good questions brought up by Mr. Tarrant and Mr. Meadows. Anyone else? Would anyone like, oh, Mike? Sorry.
I was just going to share some final thoughts if appropriate to do so.
Please do so.
So, you know, when I look at just this project and the application, I feel Roney functions very much as an alley, and to me, to have 30 feet of pavement there just doesn't make a lot of sense. It just doesn't add value, I think, to this particular street, and what they're proposing in lieu of that, to me, is more appropriately scaled to what exists on the north side of Roney. So regarding the green strip, I support that in the reduction of the impervious surface in that regard. Regarding the Morris Street, the build to the angle itself is just, it's weird, right? It's kind of similar to a case we were discussing earlier, just what exists and trying to retrofit things in a certain way. I don't really support awkward architectural geometry just to check the box. So I think what the applicant is proposing in lieu of is certainly appropriate, and as such, I support this application.
Does anyone else have anything to offer? Would anyone like to offer a motion? Oh, Jessica Major. Almost there.
There we go. I hereby make a motion that case number B22-00006, a request for a variance from sidewalk and build to zone requirements on property located at 320 West Morgan Street, has successfully met the applicable requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance and is hereby granted subject to the following conditions. The improvement shall be substantially consistent with the plans and all information submitted to the board as part of the application.
All right, we've got a motion for approval by Jessica Major. Is there a second?
Second.
Mike Retchless on the second.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
okay, Tarrant.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
By a vote of 7-0, your request for a variance has been approved. We wish you the best of luck, and we'll see you again this morning.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Good day.
Appreciate it very much on behalf of Craig Davis. Thank you.
All right, moving along. We have no old business on the agenda. We have no new business on the agenda, although I do have a question for Jessica or somebody who can, Dockery. Jessica, were we going to have, what's our meeting like in April? Is it another Zoom meeting or?
At this point, we do not have any update from the city council, and the county to allow us to go back to in-person, although I see Krista raised her hand, so maybe she's heard something since I have heard. We are still tentatively planning that in-person meeting for May, but we don't have the go-ahead for that either.
Okay. Krista, you have something?
Thanks, Chair. Krista Kuko, City Attorney's Office. I actually raised my hand for another reason. On an earlier case, the Hale Street case, where the permit was, or the certificate of compliance was mistakenly issued, I provided some guidance. I think it would be helpful kind of for the future for me to clarify that guidance, but that's going to require some additional research on a particular provision of new 160D language. And so I'm going to do some research on that and kind of provide sort of more substantive guidance to the board at the next meeting. So I just wanted to offer that. I don't know if Brian has any anything he wants to add, but he and I will consult on that and update you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, I have some guidance on what the county is proposing in terms of in-person hearings. I believe our next commissioners meeting is going to be live, and our mask mandate ended on the 21st. So it looks like we're pressing towards live meetings for our boards. Nothing has officially come down yet, but it looks like that's the direction that we're going in. So I would think that pretty soon, most, if not all of our boards will be meeting in person.
Got it. Thanks for that, Brian. All right. Our next on our agenda is the approval of orders. We're going to scratch out 22-00003 for this meeting. Each one of these orders needs a motion and a second, and then we have to each go through the vote just like we've been doing for these cases. So please be ready to give a motion. So B 21-00042. It's a unanimous vote for those who were seated today, 7-0. Who wants to make the motion for approval? Can be anybody, any of you.
I move for approval.
All right, Paletta. Who's on the second? Mike Tarrant.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
and Tarrant.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right. Next one, B 22-00004. Again, another unanimous vote. Can be any of you, minus Natalie. Sorry, Natalie. Who wants to take it?
Tarrant, move approval.
Tarrant on the first. Who wants the second?
Kip second.
Kip on the second.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
Yep.
Paletta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Retchless,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
and Tarrant.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right. Next one is B 22-00005. Who wants to take that one?
Paletta, move approval.
Paletta on the first. Who's the second?
Kip second.
Kip on the second on that one too.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
Can I ask a stupid question? Was it Lisa Ellis 05? Or was Lisa Ellis 04?
Lisa Ellis was 03.
3.
So the order we just approved for 04 submitted by Lisa Ellis. 05 says submitted by Lisa Ellis. Does that matter?
I will say yesterday. Yeah, yesterday, David Paletta called it to my attention that there was a wrong order sent out. I sent an email with the new order that was corrected to the group yesterday.
So I'm looking at Word file B220004 draft order 1, which is the one that I downloaded, or a second one I got. But if Lisa Ellis was 3, 4 says Lisa Ellis, and 5 says Lisa Ellis.
Let me check. Is that the one you downloaded from the web page. Is that
That was
correct?
what I got from you in the email.
Okay, hold on a second then. And this was this the first email or the second email? I'm sorry.
Dude, I don't know. Not sure. All I know is I've got 3 orders that all say Lisa Ellis.
Okay. And you were saying, yeah, but Lisa Ellis was number 3, but
Okay.
you were saying B21006 has Lisa as well?
4 and
no.
5.
4
Okay.
and 5.
004 and 005
Okay.
both say Lisa Ellis. I've got 2 versions of 004. They both say Lisa Ellis.
Yes, I've got 4 as Mary Hill, and then 5 is the partner, Howard Partner.
I think you, Mike, you have the one from the most updated.
Yeah, the one I sent yesterday does have Mary Hill on there. And I did send that an email yesterday afternoon, Chad.
Okay.
So we do have all the corrected ones from that. All right. So where were we on that, Terry? I'm sorry.
Meadows,
Sure.
Fleta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Richless,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
Tarrant.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. Next one, B2200006. 7-0 vote again, unanimous. Who would like to take the motion on that?
Let move approval.
Letta, second. Who?
Tarrant, second.
Okay, got it. Mike Tarrant on the second.
Okay, Kip,
Yes.
Meadows,
You're
Sorry.
muted.
okay.
No, I know I'm muted. Thank you. Please
Sorry.
don't hate on me. My B2200006 also says Lisa Ellis. Sorry. But yes, yes.
Fleta,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Richless,
Yes.
Major,
Yes.
and Tarrant.
Yes.
Motion
All right.
passes 7-0.
We got the orders taken care of. Next meeting is April 26th at 8:30. As we know now, will be virtual. If there's any guidance, I'm sure that they will let us know. We appreciate that. Hope to see you all then. And until then, or hope to see you before, but if I don't, I'll see you then. Have a good day, good week.